guys, Johnny V here from JV Design. Welcome to the channel. Now today we're going to look at this wonderful Catwoman piece, and this is sculpted by Quez. He does some incredible work, and if you're into J.Scott Campbell, he does a lot of J.Scott Campbell pieces. So if you're into Campbell or female figures, look up Quez because his work is stellar. So I can't put enough raps on him. Now this is probably my favourite piece that I've done so far, and I think probably because the sculpt was so good, and also because the finished piece is actually beautiful. So this was something that I really enjoyed doing. Now this piece here was based off Catwoman as she was in 1966, and this was the original Catwoman, Julie Newmar, and J.Scott Campbell did an 80th anniversary cover. So this is what that piece is based on, and it's an incredible piece. Now this one had a lot of challenges in it. So we had some fading on the base, I had some wood grain finish and some pearlized sheen also on the table. Her suit had this real glistening effect, a real sort of 60s sort of disco glistening effect to it as well. I also had some gold trim within the cat. I also had some diamantes that I put in the eyes, and I wanted to make sure that the face looked just spot on. So lots of challenges, little tips and tricks. We're going to have a look at how we got to Julie Newmar, Catwoman, 80th anniversary by J.Scott Campbell, sculpted by Quez. Now I don't like carrying on too much about the prep phase, but I thought it's just worth mentioning here that you can see some parts are actually primed in black and some parts are primed in white. Now I generally favour to be primed in white. I don't use zenithal highlights, so I tend to have very vibrant characters and find that having a white base I can get a really good pop with all of my colour tones. But in this case, a lot of her suit was going to be black, and there were a few areas on Catwoman that were going to be black. So I've primed her in both black, and I've primed some of the areas in white. So we can see the table's been primed in white, also her face, which has a skin tone over the top of that but was initially white, and some areas are better when they're primed black, and some areas that are better when they're going to be primed white, because it does affect the colour that it actually goes over the top of that. Didn't want to carry on too much, but I thought that's just something a little bit worth pointing out as part of the prep phase, and then we move on from there. So I always begin the process with a light flesh from Vallejo as my undertone, and then I actually build my shadows and highlights. I've got a couple of different types of pale fleshes, one from Vallejo, one from Green Stuff, and then I actually just keep adding those layers and putting in those shadows. Once I've done all of that, I then use elf flesh, which is a really light colour from Vallejo as well, and I soften everything back. And what I find then is I get really nice soft blends, and I can make sure that everything looks just as I want it. So the shadows and highlights area is something that I spend a fair bit of time on. Now here she is after all the shadows and highlights. She'll also get some rose in the cheeks, but very happy with the final result. Now Julie Newmar had a lot of makeup around the eyes, so I really made sure that I got in there quite soft with the airbrush, and made sure that I had all those little highlights just in the right areas. It does get quite fine detail though, so this is where I don't always like using pastels, but this was one area where I actually did use them, and I was able to get some really nice fine detail. And pastels are a lot like real makeup, so I was actually able to make them look really good on the eyes and get some really fine detail. Then I actually got the airbrush again and just softened them back, so it looked, really organic and looked like it really belonged there. So very happy with that. I then went into the fine detail brush work on the eyes and the eyelashes, really making sure that I got everything just spot on, because it was a beautiful cast and you could see the lashes really well. I also did the whites of the eyes, and I use a Vallejo Mecha colour, which is a white grey, so not pure white, just to make sure that they don't pop too much, and this was the result. I then moved onto the hair, and I made sure I put some airbrush putty just on the face, just not to mess up some of the work that we'd done there. And the idea here was just to use a lot of browns. I usually start with a nice mid-tone, and then I go a little bit darker, or almost got a bit of a chocolate colour. But then what I actually did was soften that back with a lot of highlights. And she had these really sort of yellow highlights throughout certain areas of the hair. So I really wanted to make sure that I was able to get those quite a bit as well. So really around the edges, which I was really, really happy with. She did have a really sort of auburn look though as well. So I had to go back with a sort of molten orange and make sure that I got that in there just to give it the right color tone. And just to make sure that we really soften that up. So getting those auburn tones in, there was a lot of different types of brown in there, and I think it really shows from the hair that it looks great, and it really got all those color tones right within that brown hair. Now, the other thing that we looked at doing as well was some dry brushing over the top. I like to dry brush first, airbrush a little bit over the top of that, and then dry brush again just to sort of bring up those little highlights if some have really, really softened, but really happy with that overall look. So it was then on to the lips and the eyes, and with the eyes I wanted to paint the mask first to really be able to frame the eyes and really then be able to work out my colour scheme and sizing from there. So once I'd finished the mask, I was then able to just take it really, really slowly and get a nice deep dark brown on there. And what I like to do is get, really sharpen a toothpick and take off some of those areas just to sharpen up all my shapes and get them just right. After that, I then go with some light brown in there, leaving a very, very dark brown line so it really looks like the iris of the eye. And we can see with our dark and light brown shade, this is what she looks like. For the pupil and the little specular highlights, I once again use a toothpick and I really get in there and give those a little dab. Now the lips were done again in a really similar process where I start with a nice lighter sort of pink, almost flesh shade, and I start to build those colours up. This particular model, she had quite deep red lips, but I also wanted to get some nice fine detail in there as well. And so I was able to do that. After all of that, I then gave the lips a nice gloss coat, as well as getting into the eyes as well. And it was really important that if you get that really nice shine and gloss coat, it just really gives it that bit of pop at the end of it. So I was wrapped with the way that everything was able to come together, and if we now move on and have a look at the high definition shots, we can see that everything, even when blowing up, looks really, really great detail. I even have the little eyebrows sticking out on top of the mask, which was Julie Newmar had these really weird shaped eyebrows, and you can see evidence of that as well. But over the moon with how that's actually come out, we're now going to move on to the next section, and we're going to have a look at piecing her all together. So we're now moving on to the body, and the first setup we've done is give it a primer of black, plus then just a general coat of black, and we're setting that up for the shimmer effect, which is about to happen in that real 60s shimmering way. So how I approached that, I used this metallic black from Vallejo, and what I did on my airbrush was grab the Mac valve and actually tighten that, so I was able to then get a spray effect where it kind of splattered a little bit, and that's what I wanted, more of a speckle effect with that metallic black paint. So using that metallic black, and you can see it here, it probably gets that little speckle. I then grabbed the piece and decided to look at trying to speckle through the whole thing, and what we've come up with is a nice little speckle effect all the way through, which is very, very reminiscent of what the real suit looked like back in the 60s. The next thing to do was then to get some highlights, which I used some deep metallic blue for, and I also went for that speckled effect as well, so it really fit in with the rest of the suit. Once I'd done all the speckling with that metallic blue, I then went for some metallic purple and pink and really tried to blend all of those in, so I had it look like it really shimmered off and had the right colours and the right colour tone for this particular piece. In the end, all the speckling, highlights, shadows and metallics came together, and when we put it together right at the end, you can see that it really, really makes quite a difference, and it's a fantastic looking addition to this piece. So the final thing was then to paint the gold pieces. I had the necklace and also the belt, and I found this really great gold paint, Treasure Gold from Folk Art, and I love the sheen on that one, and I also use that one on the cat that's sitting on the table. Now we can also see down here that we have a lighter shade, which I use this other one. It looks quite similar, but it's actually a very light shade of gold, and I also wanted to use some washes on that as well. So this is the Folk Art Gold laid down on its own. And then what the idea was to do was go to work using that lighter gold and also a whole bunch of washes. And then we're left with the final piece when we've got all those shadows and highlights, and really makes that gold pop and look exactly like it does on the comic. Now the gloves and boots had a pretty simple process. They were actually a little bit different to the suit. So they were just coated in black first. The boots had a silver base, and also the gloves had little gold claws on the end. But other than that, I gave the boots a nice gloss finish to make sure that they looked really glossy as they did in the picture, while the gloves had a bit more of a satin sheen, and I put some little dry brushing in on the creases in there just to blend them into the suit as well, just so it didn't look drastically different, while the boots had a nice gloss sheen on those, and they really stand apart to look like leather. So it really finished off the piece, but they were a pretty straightforward process. So once I was finished with the body, it was time to move on to the base, and the base was basically in two parts. It was the base that she stands on, but also the table that she's leaning on. And the table has quite a few knickknacks on it, so it was really important to make sure that that looked really, really sharp. Now, the first thing I did was I made sure that the logo that's on the table, I wanted that to have a nice white pearlized sheen, and also a few of the hints of the colours that'll be on the base later on in the pink and the light blue. So that was quite simple to do. Then I needed to mask it out to make sure that no paint got over the top of that. So I was very, very careful in the way that I masked that out. Then I went to work on the table, which I wanted to make look like it had a really good wood grain finish. So the way I started the wood grain finish, I based it in a sand colour to start with, a nice light colour. And then I actually got a toothbrush with a darker brown on there and put some streaks in there like you'd see on normal wood. Now, it looks a little bit ugly early, but that's going to be changed once I put all the different coloured and darker colours over the top of that. So then what I did after that was use some different shades of brown, put some highlights, put some shadows in all the right areas, and it came out looking like a really good solid wood grain finish. It was really important for me to get that right and really look like wood, so I also put a satin sheen over the end of it, which really finished it off. So the table came together really well, but once I'd finished it all, there were a few knickknacks on top of the table. She's got a little leopard print sort of book or whatever it is, or a frame that she's kind of leaning on there. So I painted the frame in gold in the same way that I did her belt and also her necklace. And I printed the leopard print out on some sticker paper and covered that up with some clear contact so it gives it a little bit of support, and then stuck that on, and it came out really sharp. And it was also time for the cat to go on the table as well, which I'd painted with gold and put some diamantes in the eyes and on the necklace. So very happy with the way that the table came out. We're now going to look at the base, and we're going to have a look and see what she looks like all together. Now the actual oval base that she's standing on, this obviously wasn't on the cover of the comic that she was in. So this one I had to actually use a little bit of artist interpretation. So I went with the colour scheme that Francis Quez, who is the sculptor of this, he put some colours on there as well. And it was a very soft pastel pink and a pastel blue which blended into each other, as well as the 66 from the 1966, which what I tried to do with those is get a nice sort of fluoro pink and try to put also a little bit of pearlized sheen over the top of that as well. I was able to get that nice pearlized sheen on the sort of fluoro magenta on the 66 as well. And then once the table and everything was pieced together, she started to really come together well, and when you put the figure and the base together, she looks excellent. So let's have a quick look at her piece together, and then we'll get on to the glamour shots. thanks so much for staying with me. Now, all I can say is if you enjoyed what you see, please click that like, subscribe, put some comments down in there as well. This is just something that I do as I've got a full-time job, so this is a real hobby. I don't have heaps of time to put on lots of videos and work the algorithms and all those sorts of things, so I don't get heaps and heaps of likes on my videos, but if you do see something that you like on here, please feel free to put whatever you can on there, like and subscribe, and this is something that I can keep putting out there for you guys and for the community. But guys, until then, have a wonderful and safe Christmas, be good, take care, much love to all. We'll see you next time.